So our next topic is compound inequalities. So think about the word compound. Think about like a compound sentence or something. So compound means two, right? It means we're doing two things at once. So in this case, we're doing two inequalities at the same time. We're solving two inequalities. And these are joined by the words and, or by the word or. Okay, so they're joined by the word and or the word or. So it's like this inequality and that inequality. Or this inequality or this inequality. So for and inequalities, it's helpful to think about them like a sandwich. So it's between two slices of bread. So what that kind of means is when we go to graph these inequalities, each dot, so our open and our closed circle, think of those as our slices of bread. And the and one means they're both coming in towards the other one. So they're creating a sandwich effect. Okay. Our or inequalities, it's helpful to remember a s'more. So think about a s'more, okay? And think about when you go to push on a s'more, what kind of happens when you push on it? Things kind of ooze out both sides. So if we're going to graph this with a closed and an open circle, they ooze out the side. Okay. So that's going to be helpful for and it's sandwich, they come in towards each other, and s'more, they go out against each other. And what's important to be sure is that we solve our inequalities separately. So that just means we're solving or graphing the first one first, and then we're solving the second one afterwards. But what else we need to make sure is that we graph them on the same number line. So we need to graph them on the same number line. So that's super important. So they go on the same number line. Okay, so let's just try to do the first two examples. So let's look at these. And example 1 says and. It's an and problem. So think about and means sandwich, right? So this is a sandwich one. So that means they should be coming in towards each other. Okay. So we're going to graph this first one. I'm going to graph that first one. Okay, so we're going to graph these. I'm going to do this first one. So this is a closed circle at -3. And it's coming this way. This is an open circle at 4. And it's coming this way. So they meet in the middle. So they go until they meet like a sandwich until the bread meets in the middle. Okay, so this is why and kind of makes sense. Looking at the next one's an or. Okay, so it's an or. So we think about a s'more then. A s'more. And that's when it oozes away from the graham crackers. It oozes away from the center. Okay. So looking at this first one, we're going to graph an open circle at -2, and it's going to the left. Looking at the second one, we're going to do a closed circle at 3, and it's going to the right. So they ooze away from each other. It's either this way or this way. The sandwich one can be this way and this way, so it's in between somewhere. So looking at example 3, you see something a little different, right? Something's a little weird. I don't really know if this is an and or an or statement. So anytime you see it written like this, it is really an and statement. It's really an and statement. So it's saying 6 is greater than -4 minus 2x, and -4 minus 2x is greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so it's saying both of those things. So now this is when we start into solving them separately. So I'm just going to rewrite them down here. And -4 minus 2x greater than or equal to 4. Okay, so we solve these. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I get 10 is greater than -2x. Divide by -2. X is something with 5, but remember, when we multiply by a negative or divide by a negative, our sign flips. So now our sign is going this way. But we can't graph that way. Let's make this a -5. And we can't graph this way. In order to graph an inequality, our x has to come first. So now we flip this. And when we flip where the x and the -5 is, our sign flips as well. So now we have an open circle at 5 going to the right. Okay, so now let's go attack the next one. So now we're going to add 4 to both sides. I get -2x is greater than or equal to 8. Again, divide by a -2. Remember, when we divide by a negative number, we flip our inequality sign. So now we're saying at -4, we should have a closed circle, and it's going to the right. So we have an overlap here right in the middle. So our answer could be somewhere between -5 and -4, really. So if you extended your line, you're going to want to get rid of that extension, okay? Because our graph really only goes from -5 to 4. Okay, so now I want you to try the next one on your own. It should be an or statement, so it should be going opposite directions. So pause the video. When you're done, look at the answer. So here's your answer. What I forgot to tell you is that we want to box up our answers. Even though we solve them separately, we want to say, hey, these answers are together. And it could either be n is less than -2 or n is greater than or equal to 3. So it could be either one of those. So we box our answer and we graph our answer when possible.